Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are here today for a work session. We expect the meeting is training to adjourn at 7 p.m. There may be others who will join us in course of the conversation. Let's begin with a roll call.
Mayor Downey.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Kidd. Here. Councilmember Brooks. Present. Councilmember Collins. He's here.
Okay, here. It helps if we turn our machines off after you speak.
Thank you. Where am I? Councilmember Days.
Present.
Councilmember Meredith. Councilmember Webb.
Here.
Manager McKee.
Here.
Attorney Gore.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, this training, this work session is intended to cover rules of procedure and a summary and commentary on conducting meetings. I'm going to turn the time over now to our city manager, Dan McKean, who will begin our session. And thank you, Dan, for preparing this material that we're going to go over today.
Hi, you're welcome, and thank you. This was actually prepared by a collective effort with staff. But before I do that, I do want to go over some good news. It's kind of nice to actually be able to talk about good news. We for some time have been working with the state legislature on some additional funding for our regional landfill. As you recall, about 2.5 years ago, we worked with the Department of Ecology, and ironically, we were attempting to get a $400,000 roughly remedial action grant to deal with the challenge of the harbor, the remedial investigation and feasibility study associated with Harbor Clallam. And it was at that time we identified to the Department of Ecology and helped justify getting a grant. We wrote a 3-page letter basically outlining all of the challenges, the financial challenges we were faced by stepping forward to take care of a lot of our environmental projects. The CSO project, the landfill, and the harbor were the 3 primary projects. As if you can remember, back then we were asking for $400,000. We were surprised to find out that with a little bit of extra effort, we ended up getting $4 million for the landfill. And we've been working for about the past year on an additional amount for the landfill because, as you can recall, the council made the decision, and this was in part what that money was for, the council made the decision not to take a 20 to 25-year approach, but actually a near permanent approach by removing all the garbage out of the cell rather than just a percentage of garbage out of the cell and move it back. It just made more financial sense to that, but it added roughly $2.5 million to the project or something like that. And so we did staff worked with the state legislators and worked with the budget writers in Olympia. And it looked like we were going to get some funding for that. And then at the last minute, because of the significant budget challenges right now at the state level, and the fact that the MODCA funds, those are the environmental funds that come in, are tied to fuel prices. And of course, they've been just about half what they used to be, a little less than half what they used to be, or a little more than half what they used to be. We found out that we likely would not be receiving any funding. What we did find out today, in fact, is that we are in a compromised budget that will go to the governor for a signature for $2.2 million for the landfill. And that is really good news. So, again, staff staff put a lot of time into that, and but real kudos go to our state legislators that really worked hard. Senator Hargrove was a real advocate for that, and Representative Farringer, and of course Van Wells was one of our legislators too, but they all worked really hard to get that money in there. So we'll keep an eye on that. It looks like there's a very good chance that that funding will be coming through, and we need to make sure that we let our legislators know how much we really appreciate that, because that will impact in a positive way the majority of citizens in Clallam County that use that regional landfill. Okay, so today we are going to be going over the rules of procedure, and the first question you may ask is why we're going over those. I probably don't need to go over that, but just to remind you that on January 19th and on March 1st, the council did request a discussion on specific topics that fall under the council rules of procedure. For instance, Councilmember Clallam brought up an item on January 19th, and on March 1st, I think there were multiple council members that weighed in to bring up topics under council rules of procedure, and that is one of the reasons. But there are some other reasons on top of the fact that we were directed to bring this back to the council. There are some goals that I think we'll quickly go over regarding rules of procedure. The primary reason, it's really the second bullet, I'll explain why we put the top bullet where we did. What we need to be able to do, and we do this twice a month, we need to be able to ensure that we can efficiently and effectively carry out the business of the city. We have a myriad of issues that we deal with. The council weighs in, sets policy on those. There are the accountability arm. There are a lot of things that we need to do on a twice a month basis, in fact, almost on a daily basis as staff, and then we meet with the council twice a month to go over those issues that we need to be able to do in a business setting, and it needs to be both efficient, but more importantly, we need to be effective and carry out the things that we're required to carry out. But also, what good rules of procedure can do is provide transparency and an avenue for public involvement as a way to increase overall community confidence in government. It's a way that we can, by our actions, by what we do, increase that community confidence. And it's also a time that we allow the public, even though we're not required to, come in and have public comment on issues, where again, it's a way to involve the public in our government. There's another one that I think is really important that needs to be brought up, because we're facing that right now. And good rules of procedure also provide clear expectations and understanding of the meeting framework, not just for the council, and that's really important, because at times even we're confused over certain issues that aren't clearly spelled out in the rules of procedure, but also for the public. And when you don't have, or when you do have confusion, it can create conflict. It can create conflict within the council itself, but also within the community about how we're running. So those are the three primary goals that we came up with. And of course, if the council has other goals that they would like to see come out of this, that should be brought forward and discussed. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about any changes or modifications or additions to the rules of procedure, there should be some basis or some goal you're trying to accomplish when you do that. So what are tonight's expectations? Well, a lot of these expectations were given to staff of the council, but the first expectation is we started at 5 and we'll be done at 7. If we're not done at 7, we'll be done today. We can continue to another work session. It's more important to get it right than to get it done fast. So if it takes more time, staff will be prepared to do whatever work is needed to bring it to another work session. And provide staff with any suggested modifications or additions to the existing rules procedure that we can bring back at a regular council meeting for more discussion and possible action. But today, in order for us to put the time in to bring back those modifications or additions, all we need is just a council consensus by a majority of the council members. If the majority wants something done, we'll bring it back again for council at a regular council meeting. Again, this is a work session, so all you're doing is just directing staff to do that work based on a consensus. Direction from council should be with, and this is my opinion, that should be, again, as I stated earlier, with some goal in mind. In other words, there are a lot of goals that help drive what we do, and it should be one of those goals. And when you talk about goals, sometimes it's a balance. You can't just have one goal, but it affects another goal. You need to look at all the goals you're trying to accomplish, and how does that in some way balance the things that you're trying to do. For instance, you can have something that might affect one goal in a positive way, but be a detriment to a goal in another way. But there are ways to look at it and try to accomplish multiple goals with each decision. Another item, and this is a work session, and we don't take public comment during work sessions, and I just thought that should be brought up. But more importantly, for the next reason, the public will have, because this is an issue that has caused some controversy already. There may be some members of the public that want to weigh in. There will be likely at least a couple opportunities for the public to weigh in, and maybe even more than that, depending upon what happens at regular council meetings. But there won't be enough time before the next council meeting for us to go ahead and so even if we finish today with the changes you want staff to bring back, the earliest we could bring something back would likely be the second council meeting in April, which means the public would have at a minimum 2 meetings to weigh in on this topic. And at this point, we could take a few minutes and talk about, do you have any additional goals or expectations that you would like to have before we start going through? Yes.
Well, I appreciated the 62 pages of what other jurisdictions are doing, and I think we can, there's a lot of consistency in what they're doing, and I think that there's a way for us to use some of those ideas as well. So one of my goals is to incorporate sort of a summary or consensus of ideas that other jurisdictions are following that I think would be valuable here in Port Angeles.
First of all, I'd like to thank staff, and the ultimate goal is public transparency. After a recent council meeting, I've actually traded several emails with staff, and I have several concerns that I hope to resolve through this work session, as well as several questions as well. So, my understanding, the only thing that our business resides around is the adopted council rules of procedure. And within that, it sets a specific public agenda as advertised, which we are to follow. Another thing that came to light when I was first elected into office, I was led to believe that we're following Robert's Rules of Order. And we're loosely following Robert's Rules of Order. It's not adopted council action. All of my meetings in the past have always been run by Robert's Rules of Order. And until this, again, recent council meeting, I had no idea that we're not bound by Robert's Rules of Order. I would like us to take a serious look at that, to actually conduct our meetings with. Again, that would be sending the transparency message to the public about how we conduct our business. I've got a whole list of things that's within my questions. That actually has transpired in the past. I don't know if this is the time to go over that at this time or not.
I'll be, in a minute here, I'll be talking about how we can go through each of the sections kind of in a structured manner, so I believe we'll be able to go through every part of the rules of procedure, although there are some that I think we probably don't need to spend on any time on that the council has not indicated, at least to staff, that they would like to go over. But again, this is the council's work session on the rules of procedure, so anything that maybe we didn't think that based on your discussion that you want to go over, the whole thing is open. And so I hope it will be in a minute going through kind of how we will be going through everything tonight. And you may notice too that I did not hand out a paper copy of the PowerPoint. There was a reason for that. I wanted you to focus on what's on the screen, what we're talking about, rather than trying to get ahead. But I think once we talk about how we will structurally go through things, that would hopefully answer some of the questions.
I'd actually like to have a paper copy of the approved council rules of procedure in front of everyone to see where we can identify how to make the proper changes. But again, I've got several questions about that we already have these certain rules in effect, yet, in my opinion, were not followed. Is there in the packet Port Angeles council rules?
I believe, Jennifer, did you mail those, or did you send those out to everybody, or in the box too?
I did, but I didn't have to print a copy of the
How many people need a copy?
I left already told in my packet, wondering if I have to read.
I don't have one. I need one too.
Maybe print 3.
With what's been prior approved by past council actions, I think that's what we should use as our template to build on, again, from past council actions of shortcomings or shortfalls as others perceive.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I did take the liberty of integrating all 63 pages of the other jurisdictions' ideas into a shorter version. I think it's about 8 pages, where I read all of them, sort of felt the ones that were most succinct and concise, and I put them together, and I gave a copy to all of the council members this evening. And I think that if you look at them, they probably will address a lot of the questions that we have. For example, on the second page, under 720, the city of Shoreline answered Councilmember Whitmer's question. It says, in all cases not provided in these policies and procedures shall be governed by the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order. In the event of a conflict, these council rules of procedure shall prevail. So it addresses the question just raised by Councilmember Whitmer.
Thank you, Councilmember Collins. Within Robert's Rules of Order are 5 different, it spells it out 5 different ways. So the shoreline procedures, I think, would probably be a little bit redundant other than recognizing Robert's Rules of Order in order to establish the meeting, agenda and flow that we're all after for a smooth and efficient public meeting.
I would beg to differ with that opinion. I think I've been on this council for 6+ years, and people read the rules of procedure, but hardly anybody reads Robert's Rules of Order. Councilman Gates has a copy of them. There are how many pages?
Over 700.
So referring everything to Robert's Rules of Order is going to be a very tedious process. I believe all of the things, for example, that are in the procedures for shoreline are relatively consistent with Robert's Rules of Order. In some ways, they're a restatement, and when it gets to how to make motions and things like that, again, my understanding, and I spent a lot of time with Robert's Rules of Order, these are all very consistent, simplified, and that as a council, we would be more effective and efficient if we made our motions better, for example. And it's pretty simple. There are not that many rules here, not that many pages, and I think it's something that all of the council people, including new council people, can get their arms around rather quickly. And that's why I'm going to be proposing that we include, rules on procedures, rules on adjournment, rules on presiding officer duty, and I would replace the current decorum one with the respect to decorum that's listed here, and the current public comment one with the one that I pieced together. For efficiency, I identified within those 63 pages where all this language came from. This is not my language. This is the language that was provided us from other jurisdictions. There may be a word tweak here or there, but for the most part, these are working effectively in other jurisdictions, and I think we could incorporate them. I've even incorporated them into our current rules of procedure. The first 9 rules I haven't changed at all, because they're not particularly addressed in these additional rules. Then I replaced the section on voting.
Okay,
In our rules is page 7, section 10, voting. I replaced that with a series of rules on procedures, on adjournment, and the duties of the presiding officer. And so we're simply adding to our current rules, not taking anything away from our current rules. I also felt that the 2 sections, section 9A on public comment and section 11 on decorum and debate, are better stated, consistent with what we, I think, want in Port Angeles, with the sections that come from shoreline, Spokane Valley, Tumwater, Woodland for respect and decorum, and shoreline and swim for public comment. And so, as we go through this, I hope you will take a look at those procedures and determine that these are simply added ones. And I think they would serve as well. The only thing that's not included in the public comment period, which I think we should add from our own, was the first sentence of the second paragraph, where we identify the total of 15 minutes for comment period. And my recommendation is that you look at a total of 15 minutes only for the first comment period, and then based on the amount of business, the agenda would identify whatever additional time might be allowed for public comment in the second public comment period, and not limit it to 15 minutes, but to do what Councilman Whittam wants to do, which is to allow for more a lengthier public comment, assuming that our business is taken care of. So I'm happy to review that statement by statement basis, but I think everybody has a copy. It's very distilled. There's a lot of redundancy between the various cities. I don't think there's anything here that's particularly controversial. I think it's all good practice, the best management practices for cities, and I hope you will accept that I did a lot of homework. I really went through this stuff. And I appreciate the staff's bringing that information to our attention. Thank you.
Councilmember Collins, you spoke initially about Robert's Rules of Order, recognizing them, and then again you spoke of not recognizing them. So your idea is to cherry pick through Robert's Rules of Order for how will this apply?
You can misunderstand completely, and it says that the Robert Rules of Order prevail, except for where we have specific rules in our council rules of procedure, which will prevail. So where there isn't a rule that we've identified, and there is one in Robert's, then we would use Robert's Rules of Order.
I understand, thank you.
Okay, what I would suggest, maybe we can get through the next 2 slides, kind of give us a structure that we're proposing to go through tonight so that we can stick with one topic at a time and get through that and get the next topic. And so the sections that are not anticipated to be covered tonight, what I'm going to do is I'll go through that, then I'll go to the next slide, which talks about the topics which we anticipate covering based on council input. Then we can go back to the slide and see if there's anything you want to add to what we'll talk about. But if you could bear with me then. I'm not going to read them all, but you can look at the sections. Those are the sections of the council rules procedure. If you go through them, they're pretty straightforward. We've had no discussion or controversy over any of those sections, but again, we can talk about any of them. And let me go through very quickly then. Let's talk about the sections that I know you want to spend time talking about. And there was quite a bit of reference material provided to the council ahead of time, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at that, which will make tonight and any subsequent discussions go a lot more efficiently. But the areas that we know that the council wants to talk about is how to address signage in city council chambers, adjournment procedures, speech and decorum, and parliamentary procedures. And we have each of those sections up with some high points out of our current rules procedure to have on the board that we can talk about under those sections. Anything else that the council would like to discuss, you can just have direction on things you'd like us to bring back. But again, those are the areas that we know based on direction from the council that you wanted us to bring forward to the council for further discussion. So when I go back, again, those are how to address signage in city council chambers, adjournment procedures, speech and decorum, and parliamentary procedures. Now going back, these are the items that, again, if you went through your council rules procedure, for the most part, they're pretty straightforward.
I believe section 1 would be the idea that Brad's talking about with the identification of Robert's Rules of Order, am I right, or
No, no, I think section 1 is simply referencing the authority in the RCW, how we conduct our meetings. And I think that's very appropriate. Section 2, dealing with Open Public Meeting Act, again, it's referencing the authority under, I think those are fine sections. Where we're concerned about open public meetings concerns is with public comment mostly, and there's a whole separate section both in our existing rules and that have been brought up in other jurisdictions for public comment. And so procedures for the most part and the duties of the presiding officer are much more elaborate views of what voting is. Our voting is very limited. It's like a paragraph. And it's not even a paragraph. It's actually 2 sentences. And so the bulk of what I presented and what we looked at from the other jurisdictions deals with the proper process for voting, the proper process for the presiding officer's duties. And I've included adjournment there because we didn't have a specific section on adjournment. And so I think that's a critical procedure. I kept it the way it was given to us as a separate section, and I think it's a very important section. None of the rules that I saw deal with signage at all, so I have put nothing in here about signage. And I know that that's a very critical issue for the discussion of the council, and I didn't presume to make a recommendation to the council on signage. We all have our own thoughts about that. And then I would note that the 2 sections, one on decorum and one on public comment, for the most part, I think they're more thoroughly thought out with
the other jurisdictions, and so I brought the best of those ideas here as part of my proposed changes to the part rules. So I welcome any discussion. There's no pride of authorship on my part, since I didn't author this stuff. I just simply borrowed from what other cities have put together, and frankly, there's a lot of commonality and redundancy. You know, in some places, it says exactly this, almost word for word from one city to the next. In fact, my last edit was to realize that I had quoted two of them, and they were both the same.
I'm still stuck on section 1 rules. Bill, maybe you can help us out with the RCW 35A.13.170. It's my belief that this RCW gives us the right as a council to make our own policy. And as long as we meet the state minimum, then that again is the rules that we are to abide by and proceed with.
The RCW that's quoted there is the one that gives city councils the right to create your own rules of procedure.
So at that point, that section would meet the Robert's Rules of Order acknowledgement that we're talking about, you and I, and Manager McKean is not going to talk about according to a slide.
Well, I would indicate that I think the first two sections or several sections are designed to reference the state law of how we do it. If you want to pull all the procedures and put them under section 1, I don't have an objection to that. I just think that it kind of confuses the issue.
I don't see any place else in our rules of procedure that tells us we've adopted and have on hand council rules of procedure.
I'm saying it should be a new section 10, replacing the voting one, and the adjournment should be a new section 11. The presiding officer's duties should be a new section 12. The replacement for respect and decorum would be the new section 13, and the new public comment would be section 14. And then the remaining sections, 12 through 14 would change to 12, or 15 through 17, and I made no changes whatsoever in those sections.
Clarification. On our page 7 of our rules of procedure, there is a section called Decorum and Debate. Are you suggesting under the speech and decorum creating a new section entitled Decorum, etc.?
I'm suggesting,
or editing.
right, I'm saying don't edit section 11. It has some confusing language that's not consistent with language.
Can I interrupt for just a minute? I think one way, if we're going to get through this in any logical way, we need to have a little bit of structure to it. And just going back to Councilmember Levin's comments, the rule of section 1 really is the enabling section, providing the statutory authority to do what we're doing. It's nothing more, it's nothing less. Robert's Rules of Order will not fall under there. If you look at our existing, and there's a reason I'm going here, if you look at our existing section 7, it specifically talks about Robert's Rules of Order, how we may use them, and it talks about that. I really need to go through, maybe the best way to do this, so we're not just talking about things all over the board, is we put on the previous slide the items that we have not intended to talk about tonight unless the council would like to, because you gave us direction at 2 council meetings what you wanted to talk about. But again, because we have a work session, we can always bring things up. The next slide now talks about the things that we plan on doing. Now, if you start getting into the rest of the presentation, we will be going through the sections that probably will address almost everything that had just been talked about. But the difference is, it won't be all in order. We'll be doing it section by section, making sure that we've covered everything we want to cover before we go to the next section. Then, maybe it's just a suggestion to your work session, after we've gone through all the sections that we want to cover, that we have anything we didn't cover in those sections, we can be prepared to talk about. And because at the end of the day, we want to make sure everything the council wants to address has been addressed. I think the most important thing is probably having some structure so we cover comprehensively every section that the council wanted to talk about.
So, and then do we have a consensus among the council members present to follow the recommendations of the king?
I think that's perfectly accomplishable. I think it makes it easy and then
We can't just keep going back and forth looking at all of it.
well, we're probably going to ping pong a little bit anyway, but
We'll go ahead. So do we have a consensus that it's each, since he said, all right? And,
It's a good starting point.
okay, good. Okay.
I'd actually talk about section 7 at this point, that it has no tiebacks to our council rules of procedure. I'm just interested in the end result, recognizing whatever we're going to use for our template for running a meeting, and it has to be readily available. There's nothing tying this into our council rules of procedure, or there's nothing that says we may use Robert's Rules of Order. Well, we may not. So I just want it plain at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I think when they were going to go with, we will be talking, section 7 was on there, so we'll be talking about section 7 and hopefully putting in the procedures at that point. So we will get there and address that.
yeah, I appreciate that. I think section 7 is the first place you're probably going to go. And I agree completely with what Councilmember Witham just said.
And just speaking to that, I think it's vital that we reference Robert's rules, there's no question about that. But to say, this is our Bible and this is the only thing we're going to do, I think would be a terrible mistake for us. And one quick example is under public comment. All I could find out of 700 pages, it says some bodies, especially public ones, may invite non-members, the public, to express their views, but this is done under control of the providing officer, the mayor. Subject to any relevant rules adopted by a flag. Often by rule or practice, time limits are placed on speakers and relevance is closely monitored. And that's all they say. So without going to these and having how many minutes of reviewing and things like that, that won't get us anywhere.
Actually, through Robert's Rules of Order, to my knowledge, we can use that as our work frame for putting together a public comment session, if that's the will of the majority. That's the whole thing with Roberts. It's the will of the majority. It's using their language to bring a motion up, to call the question. There's framework built in Robert's Rules of Order to enable everything that you just spoke of.
Okay, just, here's what we have on this line. Here's how this at least was intended to work. Under section 7, this just highlights what's in section 7. It's not word for word. It's somewhat subjective, and staff put down what we felt were some of the major highlights of section 7. This is the existing rules of procedure. And I know we're going to be spending a lot of time on Robert's Rules of Order and stuff like that. What it says right now in the existing rules of procedure is that we may refer to Robert's Rules of Order for those things that we don't specifically outline in the rules of procedure. That's the current language, and you can change that. But so what right now, some of the highlights there, they're just listed on this slide. And again, it doesn't take very long. If the council wished to take a couple minutes, you can only take a couple minutes to read word for word section 7. You can do that. Again, those are the highlights, and then you can have your discussion and make any changes, additions, or modifications to that section.
Well, again, I don't think there's anything in section 7 that's inconsistent with what's presented by others. But it does precisely what Councilman Witham wants to do. If we separate out the duties of the presiding officer from the procedures that include Robert's Rules of Order, as well as the voting process that the council's to use, and it makes clear adjournment, which this doesn't do. And so all I'm suggesting is you can keep 7 in if you want, because you like the history of it.
but it is easily replaced by procedures, adjournment, and the presiding officer's duties, and it doesn't confuse them. And that's what other jurisdictions have done, and I think we should, I agree with Councilman Whittam, we should clarify that.
Yeah, and I would agree that, because there are three different topics being covered in 7, so we should just start with, okay, what are the, what's the chair of council? And let's go to that, and then we'll go through the other.
In Robert's Rules of Order, it does spell out the duties of the presiding officer.
Are there any duties that we want that are not there, or is that the ones that we really
I
should?
always use Robert's Rules of Order, so I'm quite familiar with it, so I'm open for discussion, but I'm quite comfortable adopting Robert's Rules of Order 100% for the way we conduct our business.
I think find a way to Robert's Rules of Order without at least summarizing it, I think is a mistake. I don't think that what we have is inconsistent with Robert's Rules of Order right now. I don't think what, in this case, Uncle Tio, whose rules I looked at are inconsistent. And if in the procedures we reference that we're abiding by Robert's Rules of Order, if there is no reference to a specific duty of the presiding officer, or there's no specific procedure, then we would revert back to Robert's Rules, which is what you want.
I just think that once we start down that slope of what does and what doesn't apply, we're going to forget something, folks, and we're going to be back here again, or a future council's going to be back here again, trying to resolve something else. So Robert's Rules of Order has been established for at least a couple hundred years that I know of. It is always being revised if there is a problem that comes up during a public meeting. That's what these were written for. That's what they were invented for.
I would like to hear the couple of other, again, we want to comment on this.
I agree, as far as a general reference, Robert's Rules is the book to go to. But there's so many circumstances that are so easily spelled out and discussed that are relevant to this particular body, that I think to eliminate the sheet of rules and procedures would just be a huge mistake. How can we not have these that are pertinent? You know, nothing references time given to speakers. Robert's Rules says it's up to the mayor. It doesn't say they go 15 minutes. It says whatever the mayor wants to do. So I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think that's your goal. I think that that's what we want to have in procedures that help be transparent to the public and give them the opportunities.
Let's hear from the chair first.
I appreciate having the council rules of procedure. They have been worked on for years. They're specific to the Port Angeles City Council. It's our framework. Now, within them, we refer in different places to Robert's Rules of Order. So I'm not ready to throw them out and replace it with the book of Robert's Rules of Order. I want to keep this as a basis, and then if there, and I really appreciate being given the reference material from other cities. It was very helpful. I think there are a few things, I agree with Brad, I think there are a few things in there that we can add to kind of bulk up what we have, or make what we have a little more, less vague, a little more specific. But I value our rules of procedure, and I think we need to work slowly on changing them at this point.
So let me ask you a question before we. So are you suggesting, is your recommendation that we exclusively use Robert's Rules of Order as opposed to, and we're not dismissing the Robert's Rules of Order, but you're asking if we effectively use them exclusively in this regard?
Working within the framework of Robert's Rules of Order, we can address Councilmember Gase's concerns of public comment through a motion. And we can make that happen, again, through a majority of votes. Now, as far as Councilwoman Kidd's statement that we do use Robert's Rules of Order, well, I guess that probably depends on which way the wind is gonna blow that day, because the fact of the matter is, we are not, the only thing we're bound by is this document, Council Rules of Procedure. We are not bound. It says we may, and I've had this email exchange with Mr. Bloor about this, and those were his exact words. We are not bound by Robert's Rules of Order. The only thing we're bound by is this document, Council Rules of Procedure, nothing else.
And I never agree with you that we aren't, but if we did follow the Robert Rules procedure only, then that means that at every council meeting, we would vote, oh, today we want 20-minute public comment, or tomorrow we want 30-minute public comment. We could decide that, because Robert Rules says, you may decide that.
A motion.
Right, so a motion would do that. So the majority would happen, and it would happen, I think it would bring an inconsistency for the public, because like I said, today, we may decide 30 minutes. Tomorrow, we may decide, an hour. So because Robert Rules is not specific in times, it allows for complete inconsistency, and the majority will rule. So I do appreciate having something like this where the public will know that, hey, we've set 30 minutes for public comment. And you're going to try and follow this agenda, and this is approximately the time we're going to do it. That's not Robert Rules. We could vote every single meeting, okay, today we're going to have 50 minutes, tomorrow we're going to. So, but I think that would become too cumbersome, and I think that's why we have these rules.
I would like to comment back, Councilmember Brooke, that Robert's Rules of Order is built in real time, that if there is something that deserves special attention, that needs more public attention on it, we as representatives would vote in favor of changing that. I think, yeah, we will have whatever we choose for a public comment, that will be the norm, but during a controversial period of council, we would be able to respond rather than go into our rules, and the people know in the rules there are mechanisms in place in order to address the ongoing or new concerns that may come up in the community.
Mr. Whitman, again, if you go and read all of these things and you do your homework, shoreline 720 for procedures replaces the may with shall. It shall be governed by Robert's Rules of Order. So you don't have to just, make Robert's Rules of Order your only guide here. You don't have to throw out all the council's rules of procedure and just go with Robert's Rules of Order. But what it does is it says where the council's rules of order don't, or rules of procedure don't tell you what to do, then you shall go to Robert's Rules of Order. And I think that's consistent with what you're saying without throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just wanted to say, I value our council rules of procedure. I feel that there are some things we can add to that. But if we go to a system where every meeting we have to make a motion and vote on our procedure, such as, for instance, public comment, that is going to create inconsistency, that is going to create extra time, extra arguments, and unsurety. And I think we already have surety. It does vary. We do have rules to handle things, to lengthen or shorten, but we need, I like the guidelines here, and to remove them and argue each meeting over our procedures. I don't think that's productive.
Mr. Collins, let me ask you a question. Just for clarification. You referred to in Shoreline's document 7.20.
Correct.
And it is true that in all cases not provided by these policies and procedures shall be governed by the current version of Robert's Rules of Order. But the last sentence is insightful. Could you read that?
The last sentence says, in the event of conflict, the council's rules of procedure prevail. And that's why you would allow for your own rules to prevail over Robert's rules. Where you don't have a rule is when you shall follow Robert's Rules of Order. Our rules, as Councilmember Gates points out and Councilmember Kidd, are more specific to our specific activities. Robert's Rules of Order governs corporations, it governs everybody. It's not just municipal decisions. There's no reason for us to ignore rules that have worked and have been brought up over time and have been vetted in our community. I don't think the community wants us to ignore rules that they have come to count on, including public comment.
So, if I'm to understand correctly, you're suggesting, and I guess the larger question is it the consensus of the council president that this section 7.20, the last couple of sentences in particular, are represented in the documents before Senate? That is our current rules of procedure. Is that you're recommending that we stay where we are, in essence?
No, not at all. I'm recommending that we change may to shall, and that we follow the procedures of more jurisdictions than just ourselves. And so, I didn't take out section 7 because it deals a lot with setting the agenda and things like that, which I think are important, or section 8 does too. But, my general feeling is where there's a conflict in section 7 and where the procedures for presiding officers, we should go with the new versions that are more accepted by a lot of other jurisdictions. So I don't see anything terrible in section 7. We have to change the word may, but I think that would be redundant if we go with these 20 things from shoreline.
I actually do see some pretty terrible things in section 7, because it says procedural decisions shall be made by the chair of the council, who may request advice from the city attorney, and may refer to the rules of, so it's like, this is all based on the chair.
But I would replace it.
That's the part that I feel that's wholly should replace.
I'd be happy to replace all of it if you want to, because these are referenced, all of those concerns are referenced here in these other procedures and presiding officers' duties. And so I think where there's conflict, it would be confusing. I would replace section 7 with procedures and presiding officers' duties.
We talked a lot about other cities and how they're trying to run their meetings. Has anybody done a record request, I guess, to see if any cities have 100% adopted Robert's Rules of Order? Are we splitting hairs here? Or we talk about, I do appreciate the history of our town, believe me on that, but again, has there been any studies? City of Seattle, how do they run their business?
Well, the city of Shoreline did adopt as a shall be governed by the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order. We have it right here. I didn't make a list of how many other cities in the group that we got said that. I thought that it made sense that we refer back to Robert's Rules of Order if it's not covered, instead of just winging it. I think Robert's Rules of Order is a good, and all of the other jurisdictions did reference Robert's Rules of Order. It's just a question of some of them may be wishy-washy, like Port Angeles has been, and I'm suggesting we go with something more strident, like Shoreline has here. And frankly, I can't disagree with any of the 20 procedures they have here. I added some from lawful as well that seem to go to things that aren't addressed by either Shoreline or by Port Angeles. So I don't think this is too many rules. This is a nice simplification of all of those 63 pages, and I think it takes out the best rules
and includes things like changing may to shall. And I'm very much in favor of that when it comes to our rules of order.
So my question again, trying to answer that just a bit. What is consensus in the council on this one?
What's the question?
I mean, have the rest of you had an opportunity to read this thoroughly as Councilmember Clallam says? I appreciate your efforts. I want to see if I want to try to get some consensus here and move this discussion forward.
I do appreciate the fact that, you know, if it does not appear in our rules, that it should be for rules of order, and that the shall should stay there. So I appreciate that. And that actually would minimize what our rules are, depending on what we really would like to modify to our own rules, you know, for us to proceed. So I haven't digested each one of these because I was looking for all of these, and so what would be nice to see is what would a new section 7 look like? So a section 7 with procedures. Section 8 might be the mayor's responsibilities, even though they might be in the rules, which ones are the chair, which ones are specific. If the chair's rules are already there, then maybe a brief description for us, so that we don't have to be going through Robert's rule all the time. And, you know, we're following Robert's rules. So I'd like to see section 7 with the new procedures, and then maybe a section 8 that goes into the chair's presiding officer, and then the last one, I guess
We don't have a chair.
yeah, and the adjournment should be part of our procedures. I would think, from our agenda, and I would expect that that should follow at the end of the agenda, how to adjourn.
Councilmember Gates?
I would agree that the shall refer to Robert's rules is a good suggestion and much superior to may refer. I think that would be important. Looking at the whole thing, it's kind of like if you looked at nonprofits, homeowners associations, whatever, they have rules and they have bylaws. The rules are what Robert's rules would be, and then there's bylaws, or in this case, procedures that fit the specific needs of this governing body. So I think the two need to go hand in hand, but shall refer to Robert's rules as the point to go to, the place to go to if you have other questions or absences.
Councilmember?
I concur with Councilmember Gates. When I appreciate these changes and the work he's done, I haven't had a chance to read them all and study them, is my concern. So normally, when I have a document and there's changes, the original document is printed in black, and then in italics or red are the changes that are incorporated, so we can see what's the original, what the changes are, so you can kind of see them side by side, and therefore you can compare and see what is needed or what changes you want to work with. But having them separate without studying this, I'm not up to his level. I appreciate what you've done. I just want to really study it.
So then,
Just to clarify, Mayor, I didn't change any of the rules here, so there's no cross-outs and X's in our existing rules, so I didn't change any of them. I suggested replacing several sections, and I would agree with Member Brooke that the last paragraph of section 7 should be replaced with what we have in the procedures and presiding officer duties. That I think I still have 3 minutes left.
3 minutes is up.
I know. So I was simply replacing sections where they're better stated, and I think that last paragraph doesn't state it the way the majority of the council would prefer it was stated in section 7.
So Dan, are you getting some direction here?
Let me tell you what I've understand so far. I believe that where the section is very clear from everyone that may really needs to be replaced with shall. It seems like the majority of the council wants to have a structured rules of procedure on some of those more common items that we deal with on a day-to-day basis as part of the council, to make it clear to the council members and to the public without going specifically to Robert's rules, even if it mirrors Robert's rules, they want it spelled out.
Well, I guess that is one of the questions, I was like, because Robert's Rule is 700 pages, and what do we want, I mean, maybe the parts that could change is what should come up, not what's currently there.
Well, again, maybe we're saying the same thing, or maybe we're not, but I think that, again, what I got out of it, we know that the may, again, what I'm getting, should go to shall, for Robert's Rules of Order. It's just that the one item is, it seems like the majority of the council, they want rules of procedure that spell out those basic things that we do every day that make it very clear to the council, to the community, how we operate, but really are guiding. If it's not specifically stated in the council rules of procedure, you shall go to Robert's Rules of Order. And I guess why I made the statement, because some of the things that are really in the rules of procedure still could be a mirror. Some of those things are a mirror or closely follow Robert's Rules of Order. They're just spelled out so that you have quick access to how you deal with things you do all the time. But the only thing that I'm unclear about is that there are two distinctions. One is that we just slightly modify what we currently have in section 7 to reflect the may shall, or there's some talk of taking, I guess what Councilmember Collins calls the best practices that come here, shoreline, I think the shoreline is that what you would?
Shoreline model for procedures.
And then actually use that to replace what we currently have. But I can tell you, where I'm feeling more comfortable with this is that whatever we do, and based on the time right now, it looks like we're gonna end up with 2 work sessions. So whatever we do today, we can package and bring back to the council, so you have plenty of time to go over it. You can see what it looks like, and we covered Councilmember Kidd's concerns, but we'll make sure that you see the changes, whatever those changes are, because this is a really important topic and we want to get it right. But, so I really need a little bit of direction on how, again, we can take section 7 and make those minor modifications based on the discussion, or we can replace, and again, I just looked at it too, it looks like section 7, the other one was taking what was
Procedures and presiding
officers' duties and procedures, and breaking that down into a couple sections.
I just would urge you, the council, to look carefully. These are all good statements, where before things, where we get in trouble is where we think we know what we're saying, but it doesn't really say it. This is much more specific. I recommend strongly that you give all of these best practices a good look-see, and then compare it to what you have in your own language. If you prefer the language that's in the current rules, by all means, let's keep that. But I don't think you're going to reject many of these, and I think they can just simply be added to our current rules without very much conflict. Obviously, the may and the shall are a conflict, and so we want to go with this, in my opinion. But a lot of these don't include many of the things that we already have in our rules, and so we wouldn't be changing those things. So I just strongly recommend you consider adding all of these. And if you have an objection to any of these, then let's discuss that. But I don't think they're in conflict with our current rules. I think they just elaborate on our current rules. And I think they help to fix some of the things that we're arguing about, or who's in charge and what do they get to do. Adjournment's a good example. This makes it very clear what adjournment is, and we should make that clear because there was concerns about that.
I'd like to have the floor for a minute. So again, Robert's Rules of Order is a couple hundred years old. Once we start dissecting that, there will be problems. And if we're talking about having a second meeting on this, I would ask that staff prepare further research. We've only talked about other cities that support your position, Mr. Collins. So,
What's my position?
well, you want to adopt Roberts with special orders, with special provisions. And that's your position, and I would like, I'm interested in finding out if there's any cities that actually give Robert's Rules of Order precedent. Meaning that at the end of the day, at the end of the argument, it goes to Robert's Rules. What we're talking about is setting up a meeting, or setting up a structure which would have council rules of procedure being the top. Is that the way I understand this?
You are correct, and I believe that's true for all of the cities, I don't think there's anyone that does it the other way around.
Again, I would be interested in finding out how other cities structure theirs, if they do have the ultimate authority resting in Robert's Rules of Order.
Is there any city specifically you might want to, should we just put it, the top three, Seattle, Tacoma, some of the big ones to just verify?
I would suggest we look at our affordability index of those cities that are 15, the most 15 comparable cities. They weren't picked for anything other than, it wasn't used for this. And so that way it's unbiased, but they're comparable cities.
Just to answer your question, when I was looking through this, I did look at Seattle, Clallam, Spokane, or other cities. They all have extensive, tens of pages long, 100 pages long, and they're all very detailed. So I did not include those for that reason.
Well, and that I guess is one of the things that I caution the council that, I don't want this to get so complicated, but we just don't get to, I'd like them as simple as we possibly can.
I think that's a well-said point. Having procedures that are backed up by rules, Robert's rules, make more sense than Robert's rules backed up by procedures. Because, I can imagine the public, most of them aren't going to want to be paging through 700 pages of stuff and try to figure out what the expectations are. But they can look at this, and for the vast majority of everything that takes place, we're going to have a clear and concise understanding of what the expectations are. We're going to know how we adjourn, how public comment is handled, all that sort of thing. But if something isn't in there, we go here and get that rule. I think it's just the public.
So, again, you have some question there?
Whatever my.
Good if you saw it, said it that way. So, okay, we'll do some research, we'll do that. But I'm going to try a suggestion to see if it gets a consensus. So we have two things that were thrown out, we spent a lot of time on. We have some other things to go through too. And we can bring back, the modifications to our existing section 7 that we know the council wants. It's very minor actually, but we can also bring back in a similar format those things that were thrown on the table from Sherman and Rocco for discussion too at the next meeting. We have both. And then you'll have a chance to look at it, see how it differs, take the time, and we can then get on top of it. We'll do the research, answer the question, and then you can either pick one or the other, or a modification, make a modification between the two.
And just to make it clear, I'm suggesting we don't pick one or the other, that we include all of them into our rules and procedures. And I think what may be helpful, since would be if Mr. Ward were to look at the ones I've singled out and determine if there's any real conflict. But there may be other things that Mr. Ward can decipher. I just put the ones that we have, and then he can bring that to it. And
I don't think he was suggesting that council shouldn't do that. I think he was suggesting that we should.
May I make a suggestion? I think we spent enough on this topic at the moment. I think, and you have some direction here. We are going to have a second work session, which will include this major discussion we have been involved with. I would hope that we, in the remaining 45 minutes, can tackle some of the other issues that we have before us, so we're able to, I'd like us to move on if I have a consensus with you guys. Okay, so then let's go into the.
So is that, just so I'm clear, what I had suggested, will that work? That's not, okay.
I think I agree, but I'm not sure. I don't want to replace things, I want to add things. Okay? And if there's a conflict, then let's debate that issue.
Okay.
And let me, Brad, I do want to thank you for your efforts in this regard. It has, I think it's been helpful.
I have to acknowledge Carrie did a lot of work in foiling this down, and I want to just thank her for that as well.
Okay, Dan, let's move on to another section.
Okay, another item that had come up and had been discussed even by email, and we just put it up here so that the court will go through it, even though it wasn't brought up specifically by the council for any changes. But this is section 8 that refers to the agenda. And I know that even that topic had come out, and then you received some correspondence on that. So it's a review, but also knowing that it had come up, we didn't want to put it in a category that we weren't going to discuss it today. And again, just topics need to be added to the agenda, when appropriate, deemed appropriate by the city manager, obviously. We deal with the business during council meetings. At the direction of the mayor, and I just want to go back again, we talk about the mayor being a ceremonial position and also a position that's the parliamentarian of the council meetings and which runs the meetings, but there are a lot of other small things that happen too that the mayor does do, and actually the mayor can bring an item forward, and quite often those are things that fall under ceremonial matters. But also by motion when approved by the majority of the council, and that's why we typically want to get a consensus during a council meeting when somebody brings something up to make sure it's something we can bring forward to a future agenda.
I've got a question on that, the agenda. So I agree, I concur that city manager and the mayor do have the right to set our agenda, as then we advertise our agenda by putting it on the website. We're sending out to the public what our topics will be. Now, any other changes to that agenda, for example, the evening of the meeting, needs to come through a majority motion through council actions. Does that need to be spelled out in this section?
I just would add that we do ask the staff whether they have anything they have to the agenda. Sometimes late items come up, but I agree with the idea that most agenda changes need to be approved by the council at the meeting.
Well, and I believe number 3 covers that. That's the intent of number 3. It can be for that current council meeting. And we've done that. There's an agenda item that you vote on that you want to bring up and talk about at that meeting, but it can also be for a future meeting. It's really the desire of the council.
My point, though, in this discussion is at the direction of the mayor. The mayor actually meets with you to set up the pre-agenda topics. And we're talking specifically of the evening of the meeting. Are we giving special powers to the mayor?
It does mention in here that there's 3 choices for setting the agenda. One, deemed appropriate by the city manager at the direction of the mayor. Or number 3, by a motion approved by the majority of the council members attending the regular council meetings. I think that it appears that addresses the question you had.
In my opinion, section 8 agenda, the city manager shall prepare, it uses the word shall, and then it goes on to topics may be added to the agenda.
So if you were to change them, where are you going with that?
Well, I've always been led to believe that as a regular council person, I needed a motion approved by majority to change. And are we willing to give up that power to the mayor versus a majority of council members? We do a prepared agenda packet. And then the night of the meeting, if something else has changed, that we've notified the public what we're going to discuss. Do we want to give the mayor that power? That's my question.
Well, I guess what I'm not understanding is we're not giving them that power because it says that by the motion approved by the majority. So if you make a motion and it gets approved by the majority, then it happens regardless of what the mayor wants or not wants.
I concur with that, but again, the mayor has met previously. I'm arguing fine points. The mayor has met previously with the city manager, and they've set out our published agenda that we're to follow.
So, I mean, I think the mayor does have that extra responsibility as one of his actions. Do you want that there? I guess I'm not understanding, do you not want it there? Do you want it there?
I can understand both sides, but this is for a discussion point. So, again, the mayor and the manager had their input at the beginning when they set the agenda. So through the mayor's conversation, just like staff, when staff wants to bring something forward, no one has ever challenged staff to my knowledge. We never put that to a motion. So is this something, I'm not comfortable with it.
I think the point you're going with I think politically, I agree with Councilman. We're all 7 councilmen. We have a mayor and we have a deputy mayor. They are primarily ceremonial, with one exception. The mayor has to run the meeting. And I think that gives the mayor a special privilege in knowing what the agenda is and acting on that agenda, so that the mayor, or whoever the mayor, the presiding officer will be for that meeting, has a chance to work directly with the city manager to prepare for that meeting, because it's not an easy job to run these meetings. So while I agree with you, that we're all council people and the mayor shouldn't have a special thing, I do think there's a reason to go ahead and leave that in there. I don't think the mayors have tended to use that. I think that it's been more of a extra work than it has been anything else. But I appreciate where you are on that, and I tend to think similarly. But because he has the presiding duties as the chair, I think that having him be able to act on the agenda ahead of time is okay. And the city manager can decide not to listen to the mayor too, as he shall prepare.
I concur. That's why the mayor makes the big bucks here. He or she has the administrative duties, and part of their administrative duties, we elect a chair. We are not congressmen, senators, full-time council people. We have jobs and businesses, and we're primarily volunteers. We elect mayor, and part of the mayor's duties is administrative, and part of the administrative duties are the agenda. Now, when it comes up for last minute, we always have a voice in it. We always have a say-so with the council. The majority of the council can overrule or discuss things. We can just speak up and discuss things, but I really want to keep that responsibility in the one area to the person who's getting the large paycheck and has the responsibility to do the administrative work. So, and I appreciate that.
I look at the number 3 up there as having as much weight or perhaps even more weight than number two. But, quite frankly, from my perspective, you would have much to worry about. I'm going to be as magnanimous as anybody I know of. And, but, so long as item 3 up there remains as part of this language, I think none of us have too much to be concerned about, frankly. And
On that topic, I would also want to add that in the event that the mayor comes up and puts something on the agenda, because he has a right, in order to pass it, he still has to have a majority of the council. So we technically still have what you could refer to as veto power.
Okay.
You know, they put up that item, nobody likes it, we all vote no, end of story, we move on to the next agenda.
Well, again, I think that's what I said in my remarks on the code. Maybe said differently, but essentially I could maybe concur with you. That's why I said number 3 has more weight than number 2. From my perspective, I think that is the current mayor.
I actually, just my last input on this comment is that this isn't about anyone here at the table presently. This is about the future of the mayor. And I know of other towns where the mayor has ran roughshod over city council. So this would be my way. We can create this scenario where someone else is in power and at the last minute, even going around our city manager, this isn't about Dan McKean, but going around city manager in the future, and he starts adding things to the agenda. The idea is we're going to come to a meeting that's ran efficiently and as swiftly as possible to get through city business. So again, by giving the power to the mayor, they can last minute attempt to alter the pre-advertised, publicly noticed, public transparency agenda of that evening. Again, I have concerns of a mayor in the future doing that.
And I do, the point that you bring up about the public, that is the one that does concern me. If we add a piece of agenda to that we're going to vote on, that it's not been publicly noticed, that's an issue. Now, I said the mayor and the city manager will put the agenda that they know and they will publish it. Now, if the council overrides it by adding something on there, we've got to be really careful about it being noticed. So I don't know how to make sure that if we're going to add something to the agenda, whether it's something we vote on or something we discuss, or maybe make a rule that says we can add these to the agenda, but we will vote on them the next time so that the public has a potential of giving input. I'm not sure. That's the right time that comes up with the adding this to the agenda.
I think I can resolve this issue if we could wordsmith it by saying instead of at the direction of, we say in consultation with. So the city manager has sort of the duty to consult with the mayor, but the mayor doesn't directly add things. Does that work for everybody? Do you think that still gives the mayor a special privilege? Okay. Sorry, it's better than that direction.
Yes, we'll see.
Agendas are started a week or two ahead, and they follow kind of a logical process. The weather doesn't. We could have a storm, wash out some riprap, and so if we need last minute action, things come up. So we have to have some flexibility for logical, last minute emergency things that need attention now, or we're going to lose a grant opportunity if we wait till next council meeting. We have to be flexible. I appreciate your concern about a future problem, but when we have one, we should address it right now.
We actually already have the rules in place working within a council action. And that is by making a motion. As a chair, you could describe the situation that requires going into the agenda. And you could talk about Miss Kidd's emergency that needs to be repaired. and you would ask, as chair, for a motion after you have spoke to the subject on hand. We can fix this with going through a council action and leaving the mayor from dilly-dallying on the last minute agenda. It will come through an action of council that we're all going to be politically responsible for.
I'd like to just check in with the city attorney. Is there any thoughts that you have on this regarding definitions of what mayors are supposed to do? Or is this, by having that item number 2 on there, is that stepping beyond the bounds of what we're supposed to let our mayor do?
I'd like to get back to that because I don't have a copy of the statutes with me, but I do have some recollection that there is some statutory reference that might address that in some way. So I will get back to the entire council on that. I will say that in looking at this, there does appear to be some ambiguity in the way this is written. In the first paragraph under section 8, it says topics may be added to the agenda. It doesn't say when.
Right.
If you go over to the next page, it says, except for announcements, late items that the city manager does not receive by the stated deadlines, talking about the deadline to the council pack, shall not be considered by the council except on majority vote. And so those two may not be exactly.
This is right here. Thank you, Mrs. Ward. This exactly describes what we're talking about, folks. Except for announcements, the late items that the city manager does not receive by the stated deadline shall not be considered by the council except upon majority vote of the members present, which takes part number 2.
But I just to answer, I think, Mr. Yates's question. I think there have been, Councilman Wood is correct, there have been instances where mayors have sort of bullied their way over a council and their community. I think in almost every instance that was probably a strong mayor system of government, not an elected council manager situation where the mayor is just selected by the council. I appreciate the concern because I don't think we want to create a opportunity for one individual to try to control the meeting. And so that's why I said in consultation with, I think that it's less ambiguous in the direction of we have practiced that for many years where the mayor and the city manager have worked together on the agenda, I think.
Let me, really for the public as much as the council, let me kind of talk about my experience for the past 4 years, what really happens. Because it sounds like the mayor sits down with the city manager and the agenda is formed. That's not what happens. So we have staff meetings every Wednesday for senior staff. They happen every Wednesday of the year. And what we do at that meeting is when it occurs directly after a city council meeting, we use that time to go over the previous council meeting and anything we need to do to make sure we follow up on council requests, on council actions, what we need to do that came out of that council meeting. But we also, every single staff meeting, whether it falls directly after a council meeting or not, we start putting together the agenda for the next council meeting. So we have a couple bites at the apple. We work with staff. We make sure that the memos are done, that all the required information is in the memos. And we talk a lot about, the primary purpose of that meeting is to ensure that we prepare the agendas for the city council meetings and have the appropriate documentation for the council that goes into the packet. The mayor, in my 4 years, has never directed me to put something on the agenda. I have had mayors ask for some proclamations to be added to the agenda, but I've never had, at least in my time, I don't recall, maybe that's a better way to put it, a mayor ever directing or even asking for something to be put on the agenda. We have had, again, during council meetings, last minute items that came up, and we discussed a little bit, that we need to bring to the council because of a deadline, because of an emergency. And I can tell you, at least from my experience, and I believe all the staff that are currently there feels the same way, we really do not like bringing late items to the agenda, and I'll tell you why, I'll be real frank. We know that council doesn't like it, when the council doesn't like it, we don't like to do it because the council doesn't like it. It's not good business because it wasn't on the agenda. We want to make sure that it's noticed. But again, we know you don't like it. We try to avoid those situations, but they come up every once in a while. I don't believe that, I do not believe that this would have a lot of impact one way or the other. The one thing that, and I appreciate the fact that Mr. Bill's going to look into that, but one of the strengths of the council is a body, and the decisions are typically made as a body, and we spend a lot of time talking about that. But again, I just want you to know that in my time, and I can't speak for previous situations, nor can any of us speak to the future, but in my time, I don't recall ever being directed or even being asked to put something on the agenda besides a proclamation. So I believe this is really, it either way has very little impact on really how we have been practicing as staff working with the council. Now, the last thing is that the mayor, no matter what you do at this section, I'm always going to sit down with the mayor, no matter who the mayor is, prior to the council meeting. The reason for that, maybe that was my bigger point, is that when we sit down, it's not to put together the agenda. It's pretty much put together. And for those of you that have been in that position, we just talk about what's already on the agenda. We take the time, so as the mayor is going through the agenda with the council, they have a better understanding of those issues so that it can be a more efficient process. That is always going to happen, again, no matter what you do with the section. So the primary purpose of meeting with the mayor, when they get those big bucks, is to sit down and make sure they understand those items that are on the agenda, because they're the ones that are running the meeting.
I'll speak for myself in this case. I came here as less than this kid who served as mayor for 2 years, just prior to Dennis. I can speak for, if I may, agree completely with Dan. For me, it's simply a matter of, if you will, sort of getting the grasp of what we're going to be talking about, so I can speak as coherently and as managed that try to facilitate the meeting as expeditiously and as thoughtfully as I possibly can. The thought of changing the agenda would be, or add something to the agenda, and virtually the last thing to be on my mind. Perhaps Ms. King would want to comment in your 10 minutes.
Absolutely. Proclamations due to the timeliness or sometimes requested something last minute. We have special ceremonies to honor someone. But the council in the past, the council has not been favorably impressed if something's put on the agenda at the last minute. We want that transparency. We want to publish the agenda and to go out to the public, and we want that to be our agenda. So there have been emergency items that have come up that we've had to take care of, and we understand that. But the staff has to do a lot of explaining if it's a last minute emergency item, because council just naturally doesn't care for last minute items. So there's never been a problem with this. The council's always made sure in the past that we don't favor last minute items, and I've never been aware of a mayor who's done anything other than just their proclamations.
If I could, Mr. Mayor. So again, going back up to section, or to number 2, at the direction of the mayor, there should be in parentheses only, what's the word, announcements.
Within the deadline?
Well, that's the only thing the mayor can change on the agenda after Thursday noon. And I actually thank Mr. Bloor for bringing this to my attention because it really appears to me that past council actions have already addressed these concerns that we're all speaking about this evening. So yes, the mayor can adjust our agenda after 12 noon Thursday, only with announcements. Any other actions outside of that is outside council's rules of procedures previously adopted by city council.
I disagree a little bit with that. I think that it does make sense to say except for announcements or emergencies in that sentence. I know I would add or emergencies, that seems reasonable and prudent. But at the end, it says that the majority vote of the members present could add the item to the agenda. So what I think it's saying is that if you have a late item that, comes for financial reasons, whatever else, you have to get the approval of the 4 members of the council, which is item number 3 on the list, in order to have action taken at that meeting. And so I think there is, I think that safeguard is enough.
There's other ways of bringing that forward. Through a motion.
Right.
We're talking about the mayor actually getting in on our agenda. This prescribes the exact way the mayor is to affect our agenda. We can always bring forward any kind of emergency that is necessary through a motion.
Right. I'm saying,
we're talking about mayoral power here, nothing else.
I'm talking about city manager responsibility. I think the city manager doesn't have anything to do after Thursday, but if something comes up, the city manager can bring it to us as a late item, and then we're supposed to approve it if we're going to act on it. We haven't generally done that per se, but it's been brought to our attention, and unless somebody objected, it was assumed to be the case. I think it's more likely the city manager is going to bring up a late item than anybody else.
My point in all of this, at the direction of the mayor, the agenda will be changed. This exactly prescribes what we've been talking about for 10 minutes. They already figured this out, folks.
Okay, so I'm going to try to recap this because we are, and Councilmember Wenham, I believe is accurate in this, in that if you look at the section we're talking about, except for announcements, late items, that covers really what we need. If we have any kind of late item, all you need to do is just vote. If it's a true emergency or anything else, or it's a deadline, you're gonna, the council's likely going to approve to deal with it and move with the late item. So I mean, that covers it. It covers the late items. So really all we're talking about is setting the agenda. And you just need to make a decision whether you want to retain number 2 or not. That's different than a late item. They're completely separate. One is setting the agenda. That's not a late item issue. The late items, no matter who brings it forward, it could be even a council member can bring something up that want to discuss it that night. You can do that by majority vote.
Okay, I think there's a third alternative. I don't want to remove the mayor from the agenda process. I do agree with Councilman Wenham that at the direction of the mayor seems to be over inflating that person's authority. That's why I think the more reasonable approach is stay in conjunction or in consultation with the mayor. It's city manager in consultation with the mayor. And I don't want to eliminate number 2, otherwise I'd leave it in and worry about that later, but I certainly would support something that didn't make it clear that the mayor could just direct the agenda change.
Again, on that, I would like to defer to Bill and look at this, regardless of, there's a lot of things we might love to have, but if it's not legal, it doesn't make any difference what we want. And I would just like to have that checked before we get ourselves all too worked up on it. Personally, if it's in there or not, I don't really care. I don't want to find out what state statute has to say.
Okay, so we'll bring that forward with what the statute says, but also for an item to talk about. We need to make a decision on one or the other, and we can bring that back. And any other discussion?
I want to weigh in one last time, and I promise to shut up after this, only on this topic. So, Brad, what you're arguing for is number 2 at the direction of mayor, which is contrary to council rules of procedure. Council rules of procedure, previously set and adopted by council, actually says the mayor has no power after Thursday noon to affect our agenda. And to argue otherwise is to give the mayor, not Mr. Downey personally, but the mayor, to affect our agenda up to the evening of the meeting that night. So I just want to reiterate, is this something that we want to spend a lot of time on? This has been solved already. It addresses all of my concerns. I am totally comfortable with Section 8.
You suggesting that I'm in favor of at the direction of the mayor, and that's not true. I'm not.
So what are the consensus of the council relative to the language that is understood?
I would say move Section 8 alone.
Mr. Gates?
I have no problem with it the way it is, but I would still like to have the city attorney check out the legality of it. This is
Mr. Collins?
I'd like to see a change.
I agree with Councilmember Case.
Maybe it's not quite as low or high. I have direction.
I'll agree with Councilmember Gase and Ms. Kidd. This addresses it, as long as it meets legal, I'm totally happy with it.
I will also defer to that.
And so, Mr. Moore, you're going to do some research?
I'll do that tomorrow and get a email through.
It's actually very quick, I think.
As mayor, I was fairly active in bringing in requests for special recognition for staff or members of the city, and sometimes the mayor has information on things happening that at the last minute is appropriate. And it was absolutely wonderful to give recognition to the right people at the right time.
Okay, so Mr. McKean, can we go on to our next item before we run out of time?
Yes, we can. Okay, Section 9A, public comment guidelines, and what you currently have up there is there's actually 2 parts. So I'll let you, this is what's currently in our public comment guidelines. And unfortunately, this is 2 slides. But you do remember we did add an additional public comment session. And then, why don't you go ahead and read that, and I'll flip it through. Again, you also have in front of you the actual language that's in Section 9A.
This section, we had gone through this before, and we had approved, the one part that I think needs to be modified a little bit is, when it talks about, posting 3 minutes, and then for a total of 15 minutes for that first comment period. And because on days that we do not have, proclamations or celebrations or anything like that, I don't see why it shouldn't just go all the way till 6:30 when we have our public hearing. So I would say, if I could add that flexibility in there, to say, until 6:30 public hearing time, I would like to see that flexibility in there. I know it's in there, the mayor can do that,
I follow up on Sissy's comments that we're elected by our constituents. We represent the community. We need to give them as much opportunity to weigh in on a matter that me particularly might not care to hear about, but in the in fairness, we need to sit and listen to everyone's concerns. I would actually like to see the second comment period. We have to have a time in the evening that we're going to guarantee everyone that we're going to sit up there and listen to them. And I don't know what that time should be, but to simply limit them, I like the idea of the 6:30 up until 6:30, but what about on the backside and not say 15 minutes? That's 5 people per comment period if we ran it that way. And I'm sure there are more than even 10 things that people want to discuss to us about, or there could be 9 people who want to talk about one comment, but what about that last person that wanted to talk about something new and didn't have the opportunity to weigh in? So I'd be interested in a further discussion of a back-end time that says we're going to stay here in council chambers and listen to people until this time.
I would like to point out that shoreline section 6.1, the last page of the handout I gave you, is more specific about how to deal with those kinds of questions. I think that the 15-minute time period is important for the first period only. I think that the second comment period, I don't think you should have a specific reference to a limitation. It's going to be limited by, say, the 10 o'clock time frame or other business, and how long that takes. But the way 6.1 talks about it, it does make it gives the mayor some flexibility, but not, I'm worried that if we don't establish 15 minutes and we start the public comment period at 6:25, we're going to have a 5-minute comment period. And I think we need to recognize we're going to have a 15-minute public comment period, and it can't be done before the public hearing starts. It needs to be deferred until after the public hearing. So 6:30, in my opinion, isn't the way to make it flexible. Is to agree that it's a 15-minute time period for the first comment, and I think that there's no reason to specifically limit the second comment period. At first I didn't understand why we have a second comment period, but I've come to appreciate it.
You know, I think we need to recognize the purpose, I'll say it for myself, I guess, here, but as I come to understand it, the purpose of the first public comment period is to permit those from the public to come to speak to an item, a specific item.
Right, that's on, it's in 6.1.
Yeah. And so I think we would need to be very cautious. We don't stick to that basic principle. That's why it's there. And I know in one of those I read that they really did not want to, if there was an opportunity for a public hearing, those people were to be encouraged to speak during that period of time, not a public comment.
That's what's important.
That's a very good for me.
I'd just like to stress again, it was my motion for the second public comment period, and my point that I argued about was the second public comment period was in order to address concerns from our constituents about that evening's actions. Otherwise, you have to wait 2 weeks and then get in on the first public sign-in, and if you didn't make the cutoff, well, maybe you're not even going to get to speak at all. So I think it's very important that we maintain the first comment section about anything that can be addressed of concerns that are going to come up on our published agenda. And the second public comment needs to, again, what happened that evening. The public needs to have the chance to weigh in. It's very important for me to have a before and a after public comment period. We need to have a guarantee. I agree with you, Councilmember Collins, that we don't want to go up against the 6:30 and not have it. I guess what we have to do is, if we have proclamations and everything else at the beginning, and it runs us to 6:25. We stop at 6:30, we begin with 5 minutes of public comment, but we need to extend that because that's the chance for the people to weigh in on actions that evening. Or maybe from 2 weeks prior, if that's the curve they're on, but they have a chance for input before we take action. It would be nice to listen to them before we take action. So I think it's very important that we at least have the 15 minutes, even if it's on each side of the public, the hearing process, but I think we need to definitely hold that in place rather than, well, we couldn't get it in and now we're just gonna go to the rest of our agenda.
I'm supportive of that.
And I would agree, and I would say that 10 o'clock on the end, at 10 o'clock, the council is supposed to either vote to stay or not stay, and that would be the cutoff. If the council decides to stay, because we've got 30 more people to listen to, then we can make that. I know that there's some folks that do work and you get up early in the morning and may not be able to do that. I mean, and that's fair. It's also fair that they need to be able to leave if they have to.
I would support the 9:45 because we actually do have to refer to Mr. Gore if there's an executive session needed. So I would run the second public comment period up to 9:45. That would be on our published agenda. We would take the second public comment period after our agenda has gone through. We would use that additional time, which will vary always, but we would run to 9:45. That would be the drop-off time for the second public comment to finish our stuff, so we don't have to go to the 10 p.m. hopefully meeting. I didn't like the one night I stayed late, so.
It was about midnight, I think. Well, let me tell you what I got out of this. We did good on the last one. So, I'm hearing that, and we talked about this earlier, at least with a few council members, I'm hearing that during the first public comment period, we need to ensure that preference is given to those speakers during the first public comment period that will be speaking to issues on the agenda during that day, that council meeting. That's not a public hearing, obviously that's a separate. So we need to incorporate that. And Councilmember Collins, I don't believe 6.1 states that it talks about, that it says individuals may speak to agenda items or any other topic except those scheduled for a public hearing. So, but I think the council wants to ensure, and it makes sense to give the public a chance to talk about something that's coming up for a vote.
No, it is in 6.1. It is there. And that the mayor is given the authority to do that.
Oh, down further, okay.
So the other thing is that, just to make it clear, there's what, 5 other policy thoughts there, rules there as well that I think are all valid. So I think the way it's stated right now is very sort of ambiguous. I think that was the term that Attorney Gore used a little while ago. I think that what's in shorelines is less ambiguous and it's specific to all the things we just talked about. I would include the second sentence in 9A, which says, in order to allow time for the council to complete its legislative agenda, public comments shall be limited to no more than a total of 15 minutes for the first public comment period. But I wouldn't put that restriction on the second one.
And I personally go with a little bit more. That's just, I don't think delaying 15 more minutes even the public, because sometimes we have the agendas and, people need to speak to us ahead of time and they run out and they get cut off. So I would extend that to 30 minutes. That would be my, what I would do.
Only agenda items.
Only agenda items, but like I said, again, sometimes people get more come in. Because sometimes our agendas are really late, so for people to be able to speak to us.
I support that.
I feel a little more flexible.
Only agenda items.
As I say, so the public is only speaking on agenda items and we're not.
The first comment is only agenda items.
I wouldn't limit it to only agenda items. If there's other folks who want to speak, but we would get all the people who are dealing with the agenda first, and after 30 minutes, if they're done, then we can begin with the others, but only a 30-minute, cut it off at 30 minutes.
In order to run a smooth, efficient meeting, which we're all trying, I think, to have in our back of our mind. So the first meeting, the first public comment period, in my opinion, I would favor the half an hour, but only speaking to the agenda items. All other, from past council actions or thoughts or whatever, that's the time that we leave it open to run up to the 9:45 p.m. deadline. We're trying to conduct our business at hand, and our business at hand is the agenda. And we're listening to the folks talk to us about the items that are on the agenda prepared by noon Thursday.
So if these folks, if those folks want to talk to us about something else, and there is time within those first 30 minutes, and all the people talk about the agenda, and there's time left over within those first 30 minutes for somebody else to talk about something else, would you want them to do that? Because I would prefer them to do that rather than have them sit here until our...
I'm fully in support of free speech, trust me on that, but the idea is we're here for business and we're gonna get our business done. So I would feel more comfortable with saving whatever anyone chooses to say or any tune they whistle, they choose to whistle or sing to us to save it to the end. And that's what we're trying to do, is create a framework for everyone to understand and work with. So again, if the first public comment period is only to the agenda, I would appreciate and favor extending that.
And I would not support something that doesn't allow others to speak. I agree that agenda items are first priority, but, you know, if given time, I would allow everybody else.
So, may I clarify, make sure I understand?
Okay, just add one quick thing. I agree with Councilmember Brooke. I think 6.1 does that well.
So, on my page, I'm referring to City Council Rules of Procedure as of November 17, 2015. On page 6, the bottom paragraph says, to allow time for the council to complete its legislative agenda, comments should be limited to no more than 3 minutes per person, and a total of 15 minutes for this first public comment period. Now, I've heard several references to 30 minutes. Is it the consensus of the council that we change 15 minutes to 30 minutes? I see hands on everyone's voice.
It's at the discretion of the mayor. Even if there are council meetings when we don't have 30 minutes worth of speakers, I think it needs to be at the discretion of the mayor to lengthen it at whenever necessary.
I disagree. I think that the mayor is put into a terrible position when you have people that want to speak and the mayor is deciding, no, you can't speak.
Yep.
Now what do the people think of the mayor? So I think we decide that it's 15 minutes or 30 minutes. We give preference to people who want to speak on the agenda. I agree completely with that. I don't think we should shut it off for the 15 minutes. I favor the 15 minutes. I think if we extend it to 30, we're likely to exhaust anybody who wants to speak on the agenda, Councilman Widow. So, again, I think all of these things are the best practices are right there in 6.1, 6.4, 6.5, 6.6, 6.7, 6.8. And I think that it makes it less, with the whim of the mayor, no offense, Mayor. I don't think that it puts you in a very comfortable position, so.
I totally agree that we want to have a consensus of council rules, and we don't want to put this mayor or any other future mayors in that situation. I totally appreciate that. I do support free speech, but we're here on business, so if we were only allowing the first public comment period only to address the agenda, I really doubt that there will be 30 minutes, but I think that we should allow up to 30 minutes of time devotion on our calendar without the mayor having to be the good guy or the bad guy. We're acting as a body. So that's where we all have to agree to what we're gonna do.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, Lee, and I appreciate those comments. I think they make a lot of sense. Nobody wants to keep anybody from their First Amendment rights. We want to hear from the public. However, there's a big misconception that the only way the public can speak, talk to us and communicate is by sitting at the podium, and that's not correct. They have letters and emails in addition to the local word. There's court cases to this effect. Some of this information we brought out in the very near future, and I would hope that we probably will be getting complete firmed up plans until we hear a little bit more of what the court says about this.
So I'm going to ask again for the sake of clarity, at least in my brain. Do we have a consensus that the language, the second sentence on the bottom paragraph, no more than 3 minutes per person, and up to a total of 15 minutes, up to a total of 30 minutes? What is the consent? Excuse me?
I said, I'll take 30.
I'll support that.
Dan?
I'm okay with that.
Brad?
No, I agree with Lee. I think that the focus should be on items on the agenda, and I think 15 minutes is adequate. I think in section 6.1, it gives the mayor a prerogative to let everybody, if there's a lot of people signed up, to move that down to 2 minutes. People should be able to say what they want in 2 minutes if it's on the agenda. So I like the clarity of the other language. I do support the first sentence that you quoted, and I think the only question I would have is the total 15 minutes. Sorry, it's a total 15 minutes or 30 minutes. Because I favor discussion to be on items on the agenda, which is business, I agree with Lee. I think 15 minutes is adequate.
Actually, I don't support 15 minutes.
I understood that.
30 minutes.
I understood that.
So, Lucy?
15 minutes, it can be lengthened at the discretion of the mayor according to what's appropriate. There are times when we do that, and
I'll ask Mr. Keener, you have some direction on this thing?
You better be kidding. Okay, so, if I can just kind of get a hand, how many want preference given to the meeting's agenda? In other words, during the first public comment session, and we want language in there that outlines preference for those individuals that are speaking to an item on that night's agenda. Great, that's clear. And, okay, the next one, then with that in there, how many are looking at 30 minutes during the first public comment period versus 15? How many are looking at 15 minutes? Okay. And then the last public comment period, the last thing that I heard, and I saw heads nodding, that we really didn't get a lot of direction on it, other than heads nodding. It was the public comment period will be up to 9:45, I believe is the time. How many? Yeah. Okay, that's very clear. And we're after 7 o'clock, so and just so that we can leave and know what to bring back, I think I have direction on all of the items we went through so far, and we'll get that out fairly early to the council. But how I plan on doing that is taking all the information, going back and reviewing everything, but also taking some of the information that was put together that hopefully was some of the best practices, throwing it in with the changes, as well as just giving a real minimal one, taking our existing ones and incorporating the changes. And they'll both be incorporating those, but in track changes, so you can easily see what the changes are, see how low, so we can come back in a very efficient manner and try to take into account where the land order.
And can I suggest, because there's nothing there about signs, in council chambers, we can get some language about what other places have done as to how to control the signs or how to control the.
Okay, so
That, I think we need.
we'll get more information and we'll put out a couple examples both ways, so that's something that we can do.
I guess the only other thing I would say is when I went through this document, I really liked Lacey's conduct, personal, interpersonal standard protocols and ground rules from Lacey that, we might just go over or, just take a look at and see what we need to include or not. It does have a lot of it, but I like the fact that, it talks about respect and all that other stuff, so.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the member of the Lacey Planning Board who really, he worked for AWC and he encouraged all planners to look at those rules. Mainly they're, remember what you did in kindergarten and be good at sharing and be friendly. The only thing I would say is that I think it needs to be more pithy and more concise. I think having resilient, be on your best behavior ideas is more than we need to put in our own rules. And I certainly know where it came from. I know it was highly valued by that individual, and he certainly schooled the rest of us planning directors on the importance of being nice.
Okay, and then we have obviously a second session to work on.
We will
Do you
get
have a date in mind?
Well, right now, just tentatively, just a month roughly, the 4th Tuesday in April. But we'll get that out and we'll get all the information out well ahead of time, just so you have plenty of time to look at it. If you would like us to, we can also try to put out some examples under the decorum debates and other things, or we can just go through it like we did. It's up to the council.
Yeah, and please look at all those that I suggested, best management practices for rules of procedure. If you have any concern or aren't for any of them, that's fine. I'm not saying let's be perfect, but I'd like you to at least give it a shot.
So thank you for being here, and this work session is adjourned.
Good discussion.
These are better back before.